Hi, folks. Welcome back to Let's Listen, where our youth, with a little help from some folks who like to listen, try to destigmatize mental illness. Today on Let's Listen, we have got some special guests, all newcomers. We've got Cathérine, a dietitian from Youville. We've got Isayas, a housing coordinator and a youth that works out at Huddle. We've got Diana, a service navigator from Huddleletslisten.ca, and they're all going to be chatting about food and how that relates to your mental health. What are their eating habits? I don't know, but they're going to talk about it, and we're going to listen. Thank you for joining us. I'll see you later.
Okay, hello everyone.
Hello.
Hi.
So this is Omar's podcast that he's invited us all to. I'm Cathérine. I'm the dietitian at Huddle and Youville. So I see clients of all ages. I do groups with babies, adults, kind of jack of all trades when it comes to dietitian work. Yeah, maybe a little intro of both of you guys.
Sure, I can go first. My name's Isayas. I only work at Huddle, and at Huddle, I am the housing/social supports facilitator. A lot of the time, what I'm doing is I'm helping adults, a lot of the time, 18 to 29, get IDs, EIA, and then the most important part is housing. So with that, I help them find housing, or if sometimes they're facing eviction, try to help them not get evicted. That's kind of what I do at Huddle.
Okay. I'm Diana. I'm the SNS for Huddle Ganiganichik. So I work kind of in schools with youth, getting them their IDs or getting them connected to community resources. And yeah, I just go and I hang out and it's super awesome. So
That's awesome. Sweet. So we have a little bit of a mix here, which is sweet. Yeah, so I guess the topic we'll talk about today is food, how food relates to our relationship, kind of our holistic well-being, and then, yeah, we'll just kind of talk about food and, food in different ways. So, yeah, we'll jump right into it, I guess. First conversation is, what does a relationship with food look like, or what does that prompt for you guys when you think of a relationship with food?
I would say a relationship with food is, I guess, when hungry, when am I eating, what specifically do I like, and what am I feeling in the moment, I guess, is my relationship with food. Just not really knowing what I'm gonna eat and just figuring out, last minute is my relationship with food, I would say.
Yeah. So it sounds like a little bit of I need food, so I need to eat, but also that enjoyment piece of it, right? What do I enjoy eating? What do I want to eat now?
Exactly. It's priorities.
I think relationships with food can go a lot of different ways. With I need it and I need to eat and I need that fuel, but also I feel like sometimes a relationship with food is kind of based on emotional or mental well-being as well, and kind of the ebbs and flows that go along with that as well.
Yeah, that's a huge one, right? The emotions that come with eating, because eating is an interesting thing in the sense of people talk about addictions to eating or even relationships with eating, but it's not something that we can ever just choose to cut out of our lives, right? So everybody needs to eat to survive. It's not like drinking or smoking where it's one day people can be like, nope, cold turkey, I quit, right? So that relationship has to be there until we die. So very interesting one, eh?
Very, very interesting.
Yeah. Were you gonna add anything? No? That's okay. Yeah.
No.
Yeah, and then, and like you said, those relationships can ebb and flow, right? Depending on our surroundings. Do you guys feel like you have any traditions when it comes to food, or that social part when it comes to food?
In my experience, yes. Because I hate eating in front of people.
Okay.
Especially if it's something that gets messy or I have to eat with my hands. And then in other times, it's like my emotionally safe foods that I just kind of go back to that I know will nourish me.
Mm-hmm.
And that, you know, they don't get messy, or there's something that I can eat in public, or, you know, whatever's kind of going on in the moment with food. But then there are times where, like, I'll go on a trip or I'll be traveling and I'm just, like, eating everything and trying, like, you know, whatever. And so, like, there's that aspect to it, too.
Yeah. Okay.
I actually do agree with what she said. I'm kind of similar like you when it comes to eating food out in public. Like, I'll get nervous eating in front of public, I guess, just from a mindset of who's looking at me. Why are they looking at me? Are they judging what I eat? Are they, you know, all those thoughts will kind of go through my head. So, like, even with me, like, when I go out and I order food, I'll always try to make sure that, like, it's like, for example, like what she said, something that's not going to be too messy is one. And then another thing I'd probably say is, so, like, if I know I'm not going to be, I'm not as hungry, but, like, I'm going out with my friends and I know that, like, we're eating out at a restaurant, like ordering food, but then, like, not ordering too much to where it's looking like I'm just left a bunch of food there. I think is another, like, insecurity that I guess I would say I would have, as in when I'm alone, if I'm eating food, I know I can just eat this for like 5 minutes, leave it, come back to it again. So, like, it's just, I guess, just those thoughts with food, I'd say is another thing.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting from my professional field, I guess. Do you feel like, and this can be your personal experience or society as a whole, do you feel like you're eating or we're eating more often by ourselves now versus with other people just on a daily basis? Or do you feel like there's still that, like, eating a meal with a family or friends is still kind of a common occurrence?
Like, for me, I would say a big thing, I've actually talked to people about this, I think, like, I've gotten used to eating with watching on my phone or, like, being alone, you know what I mean? That's kind of like my comfort zone. So, like, I would definitely say I eat way more when I'm alone, just, like, or, like, if I'm watching a YouTube video by myself or something like that, I'll eat a lot more than I will eat when I'm with my friends. I'll be more cautious. I'll be thinking about things like, oh, did I eat this much? Do I look a little crazy doing this in my hands? Or, like, you know, all those little thoughts are just not there when I'm at home eating alone.
Yeah. Super interesting.
I don't know. I think there are so many different situations that you can be put in where, you know, some of those thoughts aren't as present, whereas in other situations they're very present. Because I know that when I'm out and I'm with people that I'm not familiar with, like, I will get something so small, I won't, like, you know, be focused on my food. Oftentimes I'll take it home afterwards. Whereas if I'm with, like, my partner or I'm with, you know, my really close friends, then it's, you know, I order as I normally would and I eat as I normally would. Or, you know, when it's noisy and busy in an area, I won't eat as much. Whereas if it's, like, a quiet setting or it's, you know, pretty much the restaurant is empty or the cafeteria is empty or, you know, wherever I am is empty, then, you know, those are things that kind of, like, control how much I eat and how willing I am to eat, and kind of, like, how emotionally safe eating is.
Yeah, it's like something I pull from both of you guys is just that safety piece, right, when eating, and, like, being in that comfortable environment, and whether it's by yourself or with your partner or somebody that you're really comfortable with, that's when you might indulge more or you might just eat regularly, whereas those, like, new environments are a little more uncomfortable, or affect your eating. Yeah, which is really interesting. And then, yeah, I think that, like, watching TV or being on your phone, right, is a big thing, too. I mean, I do that all the time. And, yeah. But it's interesting to think about because I think if you, like, think about the traditional meal, you're sitting at a table with the family, right? Everybody's enjoying a meal together, when in reality, I don't know if that's how most people eat nowadays, right? Because there's always something on the go, or kind of people eat at their own times, in their own spaces.
Yeah, which is something that's very interesting to me because growing up, like, we didn't eat at the table. Like, I grew up, it was just me and my mom, so oftentimes we made dinner, we ate it on the couch, and, like, that was kind of how we ate our food. Whereas, you know, I watch TV or I watch a movie or, you know, I listen to other people's, like, family experiences, and a lot of the times they're like, oh yeah, dinner is at this time and we all eat at the table and nobody leaves until, you know, everybody's done. And it's like, you know, kind of almost like a culture shock.
Yeah.
Because when I was growing up, it was, we were eating at whatever time, we ate as much or as little as we wanted, you know, we sat on the couch or, you know, whatever the situation was. And so it's very interesting hearing about other people's experiences with eating traditional meals when growing up it was very non-traditional for my family.
Yeah.
I would say the exact same thing here as her, because even for me, it was just me and my mom growing up, and it's literally the exact same way, which was she would cook a meal and we'd eat separately. Like, I mean, let's say she got off work at 7, she'd be at dinner at 8, I'd get home from basketball practice, let's say at 9, 10, that's when I'm going to eat dinner. So it's very like, and then exactly like, and when you watch these TV shows, you watch these movies, you see a certain perspective of life, like, oh, a family's supposed to eat all together, you're supposed to sit at the dining room table, so my mom's supposed to be on this side, that, you know what I mean? So when you see that, you kind of, I guess sometimes you do get those thoughts, or like, oh, is this how it's supposed to look like? Is this how a meal is supposed to be what would they call, like, breaking bread, I guess they would say? Is this how it's done? And then just having those thoughts and just, I guess, just questioning things. But then I guess the older you get, even I've realized, talking to friends and family members, that, like, no one actually nowadays does have the time to eat together. It's just not possible nowadays. There's just so much going on. People have so much things in personal life going on. Just having that family time nowadays is very, very difficult to have that sit-down meal. So it's just, I've seen that the way we eat, the order style we eat, I feel like it is the new norm nowadays.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would 100% agree, right? Like, I feel like there is that new norm compared to that traditional. But then at the same time, it makes me think, like, yeah, we're so packed with sports as kids, right? Or art classes or whatever activities, after school activities, or a night shift, right, for parents, or day shifts, right? They vary so much. And then I'm just curious, like, do we feel like that's affecting our relationships with our families, our relationships with having anxiety going out to eat, you know? How does that all play a role together, too? So it's just, interesting to think about. But anyways, okay. I'm going to shift the narrative a little bit, but I'm curious to know what you guys learned in school when it came to food and nutrition, if anything, cooking, like, that's prepared you for life afterwards, like, on your own, you know, without your parents being in there.
For me, I would say, like, what I remember from school are the food groups.
Okay.
They were teaching me about the food groups, about, like, you need this much grain, you need this much protein in your life, you need this much vegetables. And I remember them giving us in PE class, like, those sheets. They were pretty much giving us those sheets where it'd pretty much tell you, oh, this is what you need on a daily basis.
Was it that rainbow where it's like 7 to 8 servings of this? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. That was the one we were talking about. Yeah, that'd be it. Other than that, there really wasn't much education on nutrition or food from our schools for me.
I also remember learning about the food groups and the pyramids and, you know, all of that stuff, but it was never really put into motion in any of the schools that I went to. Like, we were taught about it, but, you know, how to kind of accomplish those needs and, you know, how to make meals or how to just how to accomplish that was never taught. So it was just kind of told and never taught.
Yeah. And yeah, like that meal prep, right? I feel like I never learned to, even in the home ec class, it was like, let's make a cake or something, but not like those basic skills of how to, like, yeah, I don't know, make a casserole or like make actually foods that you would eat on a daily basis, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would agree. I would agree with that. Same. I took nutrition class, and it's the same way you described it, where there wasn't actual like this was healthy. These are the reasons why, or this how you. It was more of like a, like you said, today we're gonna make a cake, or today we're gonna make stir fry, but there's really no like understanding to it, or like trying to explain to us that like why we make this, how it works with what did we call it? The chart. The food groups.
Yeah, the
different
food
groups.
groups.
Yeah, like they never really tried to incorporate, and it was just more of like a cooking, eating, going home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wish that there was more education on kind of like why we need these like certain fruits or vegetables or grains or, you know, meat, fish, milk, all of those things. Like why it's beneficial to the body and why we need to eat these certain things. Because when you're just like, oh, you need to eat fruits and vegetables, and you grow up in a low-income home where all you really have access to is processed food, it's like, okay, like, what do you want me to do with that information?
Yeah.
Okay, I need spinach in my diet. Spinach is too expensive for my family.
Yeah.
Best we can do is, like, craft dinner. You know what I mean? And so, like, having that education, maybe not so much when you're younger, but especially going into like high school, that information would have been great.
Yeah.
Because there was just, oh yeah, this is what you need to sustain yourself, but then no further anything. And along with understanding why we need these things, how to budget for those things and how to, you know, incorporate them into daily life, and like picky eaters and how to incorporate those things when you're a picky eater or you have allergies or, you know, any sort of alternatives like that would have been so helpful.
Yeah, for sure. I think that budgeting thing is huge, right? Just and not even for food, just for life in general. Like that's a huge thing that is important. But yeah, I mean, you mentioned like a few things that like stand out to me, but like in my profession, there's a lot of like, well, I've been told to eat this and this, but like why am I going to eat this, right? That like disconnect as to being told what to do, but understanding why, that it actually helps. Because I have people that come see me who are 50 plus years old who have chronic illness, and it's highly linked to what they eat and stuff. And we hear all the time physical activity and healthy eating, right? The doctors say that all the time, but what does that even mean, right? And how can we incorporate that in life? If we're low income, we have certain cultures, right? Traditions, right? So yeah, it is interesting. And if we could make that connection earlier on in life, maybe that would help long term. I mean, I don't know. I'm not like, don't know for sure the answer, but you would think. And the other thing too that you mentioned is processed foods. Because to you guys, like when I say the word processed foods, like what comes to mind when you think of that?
Like anything boxed. Boxed food or things that look like food, but they're probably not.
Okay. Yeah.
For me, I'd probably say like a lot of those like frozen like lasagnas,
Yeah.
pizzas, canned foods. Like a lot of those canned foods aren't really, when you actually read the back of it, you actually read all the ingredients and you see everything. It's a lot of chemicals. It's a lot of added stuff that they have to add to make sure that the food is able to stay on the shelf. And I feel like that is where the nutrition values are lost, because they're too busy trying to keep it preserved. But then you also do understand from why they do it, cost perspective. You understand that, like, especially like I didn't really come from a very like big wealthy family, so you could definitely see why a family would choose to go get that food instead of picking something that is fresh.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, like, even that term is, like, we hear a lot in social media, like, I don't know if you guys have heard, but, like, clean eating or natural eating, like, all these things. But, like, what does that even mean? Because if you think about it, processed food, every food is processed to a certain degree. We cultivate it, we cut it up, it's processed, right? So, yeah, it's just interesting because we often think of, like, those ultra-processed foods as being bad. But processed foods in general, all food is processed. So what is that? There's, like, a spectrum, right, of processed food, and at what point is it considered unhealthy versus healthy? Which is interesting, too, because, yeah, frozen berries or frozen fruit can be just as good as regular fruit, and it's just as processed, or canned options can be just as good. It's just a different way of processing it, right? But anyways, so yeah, very interesting. And then, did you guys have cafeterias at school?
I did.
No.
I had cafeteria. The food there was you couldn't. There was no fresh options. There was a lot of stuff that you could tell was packaged up, that's been there for a little bit. The closest thing you could get to something that was decent, I would say, I think it was something called a bob on cheese. And that was like...
What is that?
A bob on cheese was, I think, it was either ham or bacon, they put egg on it, and then they put a sauce, and then they put in a bagel. Bob on cheese, that's what they called it. And then the egg would be added some cheese. I guess that's where the cheese would come from.
Yeah.
But that was the closest thing. Everything else was either bag chips or what was another thing I remember? There was red velvet cakes that were really good. That was it. Everything else was just like stuff I could just get off of a vending machine, like chocolate milk, chips, snacks. But that was it. That wasn't really like actual like food, I would say.
Yeah.
I went to an alternative high school, and so we were very small, and we had a kitchen, but the students weren't allowed to use it during lunch. And so we had a corner store, and we had like a few little places kind of like around. And then there was like mini mall like 3 or 4 blocks away where we could get food. And so if you didn't bring your own lunch, you pretty much just had to venture out.
Yeah.
But yeah, we didn't have like a cafeteria.
Did either of you guys have a food program, like a school lunch program or a breakfast program at your schools?
We had a breakfast program.
Okay.
But it was very much like first come, first serve.
Mm-hmm.
I remember having a breakfast program in elementary, but nothing in high school or junior high, I would say. Just in elementary.
Okay.
Just kind of like her too, she said, which was first come, first serve.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, and again, that's just like the interesting thing, and especially in my profession, we really promote all food fits, right? And health at every size, right? But we also want to acknowledge that we do want to promote eating all food groups, right? And having variety in our diet. So it's finding that balance of having that cafeteria, still being okay with, what did you call it, the bubba melt?
Bob on cheese.
Bob on cheese, but maybe we have other stuff included in there too, right? So it's just interesting, like from a young age, it seems like we're promoting, and how much of that is probably influenced by companies too that are like, here, take my product and sell it at your school, right? Or sell it near your schools. But, I guess on the topic of social media, I would be curious what you guys see regarding food and social media right now. And yeah, if there's any fad diets, like any big diets that are out there or promoted. Any trends that you guys see?
Like for me personally, I feel like social media, especially nowadays, there's people who I knew who knew nothing about like food and fitness who are now experts.
Yeah.
Who are now full-on experts who know who know everything about their dieting, which in a particular way I think is really good, because I feel like there's people out there who definitely did need that, who needed the help. But then there's also people who I've seen personally, who I've seen like, whoa, that seems a lot. But if they feel happy and if I feel like if they feel accomplished, I guess that is what they like to do, and that's what they do. But yeah, no, I feel like social media has definitely created some experts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, on social media, you kind of see it all. Like, I see a lot of moms who are like very holistic and like eating fresh and clean, and you know,
Isn't there a name for, like trad wives or
yeah,
something? Yeah, that's a big
something
thing
like
now.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I see those sides of things, and it's like, wow, that seems like a lot.
Yeah.
And that seems very like, I don't know, it's so like romanticized in a way, to be like, okay, I you know, cook for my millions of kids and for my husband, and you know, whatever that situation may be, or like clean eating, all of us eat clean, or like, you know, everything is from scratch. Like I see what's her Nara Smith, and like how she just makes everything from scratch, and I'm like, how do I do that?
Yeah.
Like, am I supposed to be doing that? Am I supposed to be making like bubble gum from scratch? Like I don't get it.
Yeah.
Whereas I also see like just creators that just like cook meals, like that's what they do, and their videos are very stylized, and you know, they just cook, and that's super awesome too. And then I see like the fitness aspect of things, where they're like meal prepping, and they're, you know, everything is to like, you know, fit into like some sort of calorie deficit and things like that. And so social media is kind of like a whirlwind when it comes to food, just because you see so many different aspects of, you know, how people eat, or, you know, if they even are eating those things. And it's like, okay, where do I, you know, kind of like follow? Where do I, you know, how do I make food? And like, you know, when I make food, it doesn't look as good as like Nara Smith or like a mom creator, or like a fitness creator. Like it's, yeah. So it's kind of like a whirlwind of a bunch of different things.
There's like so much info, and it's like, how do I apply this to my own life kind of stuff, right? Yeah. And like, what do I take and what do I leave? Like what is, because yeah, like Nara Smith or these moms, like these people that are making everything from scratch, like things that you didn't even, like bubble gum that you didn't even think you could make from scratch, right? And then it's like, okay, well, am I lesser than because I'm not doing all of these things for the people that I love or whatnot, right? And then that can be discouraging too, right? If you don't feel like you're doing all those things. I find it really interesting, like on social media, is you see that, where you see like that extreme, doing everything from scratch, and then you see the fitness gurus, you know, like the carnivore diet, the like extreme diets, and the hard and fast rules, right? Like, you can only eat this. You can't ever eat this, right? It's like there's no room for a little bit of everything in there. But then I also see things like during the Olympics, I saw like Ozempic was a huge thing. And so you have these like A-list athletes competing, but then right after, during commercial breaks, you have like commercials from Burger King, and you have commercials from like McDonald's, right? And then right after those commercials, you have these Ozempic commercials, which are like weight loss, like a weight loss pill. So just such confusing messaging when you're like seeing a professional athlete eating hamburgers saying, I use Ozempic, right? Like, so controversial.
Yeah, and especially kind of tying into those, you know, food groups and those pyramids of food growing up, and like this is what we're supposed to be, you know, kind of intaking, and then seeing on social media that like you have to cut out like all of these grains or, you know, things that are high in sugar, or, you know, whatever it may be, is definitely contradiction, because this is what we're taught growing up, but this is not what we're seeing from, you know, other adults or, you know, people our age or whoever may be, you know, outputting this into the world.
Yeah. That's very interesting.
I would definitely agree. And I also feel like when you see that much stuff in 1 minute, and then if you do have any food insecurities, or if you feel insecure with your body, I feel like those videos don't help. I feel like they build up the anxiety onto people, because when you see that much stuff that's so contradicting, I feel like your brain will just get too much overwhelmed, and every time you do eat, every time you do something, or if for example, if you're trying to lose weight, if you do eat something, I feel like you'll feel that stuff conscious, which I guess in sort of way some people might agree is the reason why they're doing it, but I also don't feel, I feel like if mentally it's affecting you, then I feel like losing the weight, or trying to keep losing the weight, you're going to have a difficult time, because there's that mental aspect too now you have to deal with. It's not just the food aspect you're dealing with.
Yeah.
I'd say.
Yeah, for sure. Very confusing information out there, for sure. And then especially then we think back on like what we were talking earlier about early education. It's like if we're not even taught the basic skills of these things, and then we get all this mixed messaging. It's like we don't even have that baseline knowledge, right? And then we fall into these kind of dangerous patterns of eliminating complete food groups, and then we might develop poor relationships with our bodies and with food, and it's just kind of a spiral, right? All right. Sorry, I'm just looking at my other notes. I have so many things, but food costs. So you did mention like income. So I am curious how you guys think food costs, inflation affects food intake for youth and for people in general, families, parents.
I feel like that's the major issue, and why a lot of people like eat a lot of the processed food is because of cost. The cost of living and the cost of getting, as people like to say, the proper food, like fresh vegetables, fresh fruits, fresh like meats, all that. I feel like the cost of that is so much higher that parents do feel, and parents would take it. I feel like they do feel the pressure of, I want my kid to succeed. I want my kid to do this, but for them to have a roof over their head, I'm gonna have to give them this processed food just for this, but I'm gonna try my best. But I feel like parents do try, and I feel like a lot of people do try, but with the cost of living and the way our economy is at the moment, trying to be healthy, trying to stay healthy is just unaffordable for a lot of people.
Because it's expensive enough for a single person to have, you know, all fresh food and like healthier options. I couldn't even begin to think about, you know, like a family of 5 trying to eat clean and, you know, healthy, whatever that may look like. Especially since, you know, there's so many other aspects to life now, especially with housing and with, you know, non-livable wages and, you know, anything and everything like that. Especially being a young person working minimum wage and trying to live on their own. Like there's only so many options that you can kind of go for when you're put in that situation and trying to feed yourself.
Yeah. And if you're working a ton, right, just to make ends meet, then you also don't have time to do the cooking, right? Or that family of 5 might not have time to make a meal, right? And just, have to rely on those big things. Ready things. Yeah. No, it's definitely makes it harder, right? And And unless you have the time to educate yourself or to do like budgeting or meal planning or that meal prep, that makes it harder too, right?
And I feel like even if families did try to do that, it's like you said, time, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's going to take time, meaning they're not at work. So like everything, it just kind of starts adding up, and then by the time you add up everything, you're stuck on the frozen food aisle or the processed food aisle, and then it's not really as healthy, but I guess they're just trying to put a meal on the table, and they have to for that night, so that's what it is for that night.
Yeah. I guess I'm curious, this is a little bit apart, but I'm curious what you guys, like when you hear the word dietitian, what comes to mind for the field of dietitian? And you can be straight up, as honest as you want. Like, yeah, what do you think that we do on a daily basis, or, yeah?
For me, the only time I've really ever heard of a dietitian before I met you was in sports. Like in sports on TV, they would always talk about, like, for example, like LeBron James. They always talk about LeBron James spending $100,000 on his body, and that's just on nutrition. That's not even going to the gym. That'd be one example I would say. Another example I would say of a dietitian would be in football. There was this one documentary I was watching for a little bit, and they brought in a dietitian to just kind of explain what the different food groups are and why each different position will eat a certain amount and how they came to that research. Other than that, I never really knew much about dietitians.
Very much related to sports.
That was it.
Yeah.
I never heard of after that.
Yeah, I think dietitians are just kind of there to have that conversation about food. I saw a dietitian when I was quite young because of some unhealthy habits that I was having with eating, and kind of talking about the emotions around eating and having that conversation of like why I needed to eat, which was, a little bit scary, because before that I think I only ever heard the term dietitian in like weight loss. And so I was like, I'm like 12, like why do I need to lose weight, like, and then that came with a lot of emotions of its own. And so I think my experience with a dietitian was like pretty good. Like, we had that conversation of safe foods, and we had that conversation of, that food is fuel. And so I think that was like my experience and like my thoughts kind of around it.
Well, that's fair. It's very interesting, because a lot of people come and they'll say, what do you even do? Like, what is a dietitian, right? But I think that's like a huge part of it is the emotions related to food, and it's so based on mental health too, right? And what's influenced socially, and safe foods, and food is fuel, right? Like we mentioned way earlier on, like it's not something that we can just cut out of our lives. We need food for to live. So I'm always curious what people think of dietitians and like how we can help and maybe make change in the way that people think about food and fuel. So well, our conversation's been pretty bleak or pretty sad around food, but I am curious, like, what are some positive things that you think food can contribute to our mental health, to that social connections, to fueling our bodies? Like, what are some positive things you think about food when you think about food?
Like, for me, I would say with food, one thing is it brings a lot of people together. Like, when you go to a lot of events, it's always around food. You're always eating food, so just there's some involvement of food. I feel like that is one thing about food that is very, very positive, is it does bring people together, and I've seen it bring people together, especially if you order the right type of food. You're going to see people you've never seen before show up to things. But other than that, I'd probably, another great example I think with food is if you actually like understand nutrition and you understand the importance of eating and why it's important to eat certain things, I feel like you'll have a better appreciation, because I do have people in my personal life who do take their diet pretty serious, and from their experience, what they've told me is getting on a diet, but like getting on a meal plan, just understanding what they're eating, what's going on into their body, has definitely helped them mentally and as well physically. And then they also said their sleeping patterns have gotten better. So I personally have heard from people what positive things about food, and how just just dieting, but not. I don't want to say dieting, but it's just there's just parts of it that is very, very important, and how eating food is just, it can just getting the right nutritions inside of you can definitely brighten your day up. I'd say just definitely make your day go a lot better.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't like just say like the community aspect of it, but also like the cultural aspect of it. Like in a lot of cultures, people love to share food. Like that is one of the first things that people share when you do go to like a cultural event, or you travel, or you make friends with whoever, or families. The first thing that people do is they make food. And so it's a great way to connect with people, because people love to share the food that they grew up with. Like we think about comfort foods, we think about food from when we were growing up, and that's what people love to share. People love to share. Yeah, and then you do go to community events, and that's what brings the people in, but also brings them together. And eating can be such a vulnerable thing, and so to be able to eat with people is just, it's a different type of connection. And then just food brightens your day. The more fuel you have in your body, the more you can kind of function properly, and the more you feel good. Like people get hangry, people when mental health starts to get low, people don't want to eat as much, but then you eat and you feel just better. And so I think those are some pretty positive things about food.
Yeah. I mean, like you're saying, like the classic saying, or not saying, but like to bring ice cream to somebody that's sad, right? Like there's a space for all foods, and it can help us in many different ways, right? Which is such an important thing. And like Isayas, you were saying, like knowing how certain foods are fueling us or helping us too, that can have a huge greater relationship with food, or appreciation for the food you're putting in your body too, right? If you're actually like feeling more energized, or if you're hangry and then you're eating, you've been looking forward to supper all day, and then you eat it, and that brings joy, right? Which is huge. And like you said, the cultural piece too is a huge thing, because especially living in Canada, we're a melting pot of different cultures, and for a lot of people, maybe food is the only thing that's still linking them back to their culture, right? So to share that is a huge thing and a beautiful thing. Yeah, I'm curious, do you guys have any favorite meals that you like to share, or whether it's cultural or just fan favorite? Like if you're going to a potluck, what would you bring?
One of my favorite foods is moose meat stew and bannock, which is like, that's the first thing I look for at any event. Are we having stew and bannock? That's all I care about if we're going to like any sort of event. Or I don't know, just that's my favorite.
Yeah.
It's a tough one. Tough one. Tough one. What to my head right now? I'd probably have to say lasagna. I don't know about it. It's just,
that's a good
especially
thing.
me and lasagna. That definitely hits the spot.
That's
Will
awesome.
definitely hit the spot for me.
Yeah, I think for me, I love just trying all different types of foods. Like if somebody brings something unique, I love to try it and learn where it came from and stuff. But I also love making tourtières, like meat pies, because I'm French, and French Canadians love that, and so it's again a way for me to share part of myself with other people too, right? So yeah. Okay, well I think we'll end it at that on a high note, but thanks for joining. Do you guys have any last comments or before we thanks, Omar, for having us.
Yeah, thank you, Omar, for having us.
Oh my gosh, thank you, Omar.
Yeah. All right. Bye, everyone.
Well, all right. You gonna learn today. What did we learn today? I learned that I really, really want some jerk chicken right now. Why don't you guys write in to hubfeedback@youville.ca and tell us, share with us, tell us what you've learned. Thank you for listening to Let's Listen. Huddle, here for youth. Enjoy your food.